No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live episode number 106. And to our wonderful American Outspoken family, happy Thanksgiving. I wish I was with you for a whole load of turkey today, but thank you for still being here on your special day. And please do click to subscribe to our brand new independent news source, turn on the notification bell, and then you'll be alerted to all of our new episodes. Breaking right now. 2 Reform UK bombshells. Former Deputy Leader Ben Habib is out.
I find that, frankly, unacceptable. And I would say I'm resigning as a member of Reform. I can't resign as a member of Reform because I'm not a member.
But former Conservative Minister Dame Andrea Jenkins is in.
Our once great country is at a crisis point.
So what does this mean for Nigel Farage's party, which is soaring in the polls? I'll analyse in my digest next. And then Dame Andrea will join us live. There she is en route. Also on the show today, Charlotte Gill, the woman behind Woke Waste, is here to reveal her most shocking findings. She will tell us the real reason behind Carol Vorderman's late life entry into politics and expose the truth about the left-wing campaign group led by donkeys. Then, in the Uncancelled Aftershow, a bombshell report claims that Prince Harry wants to make a royal comeback with King Charles, open to the idea of his son returning with Meghan Markle. Royal YouTube sensation, according to Taz, isn't happy about that concept at all. We'll reveal what's really going on. And remember, the Uncancelled Aftershow now broadcast exclusively daily and on demand via Substack. And we have a huge Black Friday sale running on the Substack at the moment. 30% off. It is our biggest ever sale, and it is a way for you to support this show from just £3.50 plus VAT per month. However, there is an option to sign up and subscribe completely for free. It is so important that we are connected together as an outspoken community. So don't you worry about that. www.outspoken.live. But now, let's go. A dark day for Britain. Yet again, the authorities and the deep state lied to us. The Office for National Statistics revised its former record high net migration figures up by 300,000. That means in just 1 year, the population of our country, which is already bursting, went up 906,000, with 1.2 million folk being allowed in, including 127,000 Indians to study and 116,000 Indians to work. Meanwhile, the invasion of our southern border continues every day on an unrelenting basis. Spending on illegals also reached a record £5.38 billion, up 36%. I'm furious. I'm sure you're furious. This cannot go on. As Alison Pearson wrote on X, utterly disgraceful. 1 million immigrants let in last year to a country where you can't see a GP or a dentist. You wait 2 years for routine surgery. Midwife services are dangerously poor, and hundreds of hotels contain undocumented young males. In a pointless press conference this afternoon, which I'm not even going to bother showing you, I watched it so you don't have to, Slippery Starmer promised to bring the numbers down. But do you really believe him? No, me neither, because he refused to set any form of target. So where is the hope politically going to come from? Well, a bombshell new poll today makes that clear, with Find Out Now numbers showing a catastrophic drop for Labour. They're down 9 to 25%. But here's the key point of this poll. Nigel Farage's Reform UK up 8 to a record high of 22%. So while the Tories might be celebrating leading that poll, they really shouldn't be, because this immigration mess is down to them, and we know it. Nigel Farage knows that if he's able to start tempting a few real Conservatives to his insurgent movement, it won't be long before he is leading in the polls. And he made the first move today. It was a big one, with the wonderful former Education Minister Dame Andrea Jenkins defecting from the Conservatives for whom she once sensationally unseated Ed Balls to run for Reform UK to become the first ever Greater Lincolnshire Mayor.
And she will run to be the newly created Mayor of Lincolnshire on May the 1st next year, and I believe she has every chance of winning. Dame Andrea, I hope you're here.
I have to admit, I feel a bit shaky in the back of the stage. Today, I've joined the party of the brave.
And I know this was a hard decision for Dame Andrea, but it was the right move.
Our once great country is at a crisis point. Labour's record speaks volumes already, you must agree. They have compromised our British territories, fleeced our farmers, and they're punishing our pensioners. Their policies are anti-business, anti-aspiration, and detrimental to all that we hold dear as a country. In the past 5 months, as we've seen, our British people have been locked up for expressing their opinions, while real criminals are being released early onto our streets. This is not the Britain that we deserve. But in times of crisis, we need strong leadership. We need those patriotic, brave hearts to be a true voice for the people, and Reform is that voice.
But the blockbuster announcement that Dame Andrea was defecting to Reform UK was overshadowed somewhat by a bombshell resignation from the party's highly respected former leader Ben Habib, who posted on X, "It is a sad day for me. I must sever my ties with Reform. Needless to say, I shall remain a part of the movement I helped create and will go on fighting for a proud, sovereign, democratic, prosperous United Kingdom." So why has he done it? Well, he says that it is in part because of Richard Tice's comments about those who marched as part of Tommy Robinson's Uniting the Kingdom movement.
Nigel said that he was not in favour of mass deportations. Well, I'm firmly in favour of mass deportations. Anyone in this country who is here illegally must be detained and deported. Again, this is not semantics. I think Nigel in a subsequent interview said that there are problems, logistical problems in detaining and deporting so many people. I think there's over 1 million people in the United Kingdom illegally. But I concede that point readily. Of course, there are logistical issues, but that doesn't mean you don't do it. You begin doing it and you keep doing it until it's done, even if it takes a long time. That is the path on which the United Kingdom must set itself. And then I had a particular issue, I think, with Richard Tice saying that he described the gathering on the 20th of September in Whitehall in Parliament Square as that lot, eschewing, I think, the support of our movement, people, valid British citizens who no doubt voted Reform UK. He regarded them as unpalatable.
He also cast doubt on the strategy of attempting to poach Tories.
And I think there have been a few more defections from the Tory party to Reform, and all of these are trumpeted. But it's our people that should be trumpeted. It's the movement that we created that should be trumpeted, not the people joining from the Tory party who are part of a party that delivered the country into the peril in which we now find ourselves. So I can't understand this obsession with recruiting Tories. Sure, there are some good Tories that are worth recruiting. Suella Braverman, for example. But why would you want to open the party up wholesale to defections from the Conservative Party?
Now, where I disagree with Ben is that the right does have to unite. And there are many good, true Conservative people in the Tories, like Dame Andrea, like Suella Braverman, who he referred to, who should be welcomed with open arms by Reform UK as they hope to form a government. But as the obvious split in the party shows today, it's not going to be straightforward, because losing someone brilliant like Ben from your movement is a major loss. But now, the Uncancelled interview. And the woman of the moment, Dame Andrea Jenkins, joins me live. So, Dame Andrea, look, we know they've been trying to get you for a long time. They tried to get you before the election. What changed your mind?
In all honesty, Dan, we're friends, aren't we? We know each other well. It was Kemi becoming leader. I've publicly said a number of times, if Kemi become leader, then I'm off. And I'm a person of my word. But I backed Pretty, and then when she came out the contest, I backed Robert. And these are the true Conservatives who I think should be leading the Conservative Party. And look at Kemi; she didn't rip up the EU laws on the statute, which was her responsibility. And I was very saddened by that. And so I thought, look, it's time to go to a party what truly believes in Britain, which speaks common sense and actually says the things that people are thinking but don't often say.
Totally. I think it was a catastrophic decision.
By the way, I'm not driving.
No, exactly. There's no law breaking going on here. I presume you're heading home, right? Because you've been.
No. I'm doing media this evening. And setting off at 11 o'clock this evening. I won't get home till 3 o'clock in the morning. So then take my little one to school. So yeah, I've got a long night ahead.
Now, what does Boris Johnson think? You're such good mates, and he was obviously your biggest champion. He made you education minister. He made you a dame. Is he gutted about this?
No, I had a chance to speak to Boris yet. I really value both him and Carrie. And I, think a lot about both of them. As you know, I've publicly defended Boris because I truly believe in him right from the beginning. And I'm saddened that is still not Prime Minister. So I'm going to ring him, and I'm going to explain my decision to Boris and Carrie.
Have you heard from Kemi or any other senior figures in the party since your announcement today?
Not Kemi, no. Look, I have heard from some senior figures. It was mainly of sadness. I've had a couple of people in Yorkshire, former MPs, throw me out of WhatsApp groups, etc. But that's part and parcel, isn't it? And I mean, one of them used to be in the Lib Dem, so I don't know how they can sort of take that approach.
I guess the thing is that you tried so hard before the last election to engineer some sort of deal between the Conservative Party and Reform UK. You were even in number 10 with Rishi Sunak outlining a proposal. So presumably you feel like this was the party's mistake.
Yeah, I mean, look, I could see how the election was going to pan out, Dan. We could see that it's going to be a Labour massive majority. There's going to be apathy, low voter turnout, and Reform was going to split the Conservative centre-right vote. And so I tried to bring both parties together, even though I was Rishi's greatest critic. I could see it's more about the country, stopping a socialist government. And unfortunately, it didn't work. I've tried. But I got elected as a Conservative, and I went down as a Conservative, lost my seat as a Conservative. I think that was the right thing to do. It would have been easy to go to Reform before the election, but that's
you
not
would have
me.
won.
I was loyal to the party. I would have.
You would have won your seat.
Yes.
In the same way that Lee Anderson did. No, because you felt you were elected as a Tory. The honourable thing was to go down as a Tory, and then you were going to consider your options. Do you genuinely believe in your heart, in your soul, that Nigel Farage is the next Prime Minister of the UK?
I mean, look, there's the people who politicians who genuinely connect. That's Boris, that's Nigel, that's Trump. They connect to the people. And Kemi doesn't connect to the people, so I think that, look, we've seen in America a tsunami, with the Liberals who are trying to stop Trump. We saw Brexit here, Dan. And I just think that, the public's crying out for true common sense, honesty in politics. And another thing that persuaded me was, look how Reform stood up for that policewoman in Manchester. And, what happened in Manchester should not have happened. And those people wasn't arrested at the time, were they? They wasn't taken to trial, and they should have been. And good on Reform for actually doing an individual case to protect that policewoman, really. And so that was another thing. I want to be part of a movement, of a party who sticks up for the general public. Because let's face it, I mean, your show's great, Dan, because it's about being uncancelled, and so many people are getting cancelled and have for so long. We've seen political criminals being arrested and paedophiles, ex-paedophiles being released. And what kind of country are we living in under Labour? And so we've got to stand firm, we've got to speak out, and we've really got to do this with grit.
Well, there has to be a revolution, doesn't there? I don't think it's enough to say more of the same. Kemi Badenoch yesterday on immigration refused to set a target, refused to talk about mass deportations. What's the point? It's not good enough to do more of the same. Look at those immigration figures today. That was under the Conservative government where she served in the cabinet. 900,000 in a year.
Well, look, a year ago, Claire and I from the Conservative Post, we did the Leave the ECHR petition. And I mean, we got about 50,000 signatures to this. I mean, that was a year ago we were saying this. And this is the only way we're going to be able to control our borders, Dan. And we have got to do these things.
We do. We've got to be bold. That's the thing. It has to be bold. I think the time for this sort of creeping establishment approach is wrong. And look at the petition. Look at the petition this week. Hurtling towards 3 million.
It's amazing.
It is, isn't it? And that's why I get that sense of revolution. I think there needs to be more Conservative politicians who are brave, who make the move like you, because otherwise they're going to be swept away. And look, maybe it's 4 years, Andrea, but can you really see this government lasting 4 years?
They've got a super majority there. That's the problem, Dan. I mean, this role in Lincolnshire, being their candidate for Reform for Greater Lincolnshire, is an important role. It'd be sort of responsible if elected for, over 1 million people. And I think that can be a blueprint to, I mean, your guest who you've got on the show tonight, I love her. And, what I said on stage today was, I want to root out the woke, and because it creeps into governments of both colours. And I'd like to see a blueprint of what we can use, work with Nigel, work with Richard, to actually have this common sense politics again in Britain.
Indeed. And there is the petition, Andrea, 2.8 million. Look
Amazing.
At that. Hurtling towards 3 million. Have to ask you about Ben Habib's departure today. That's sad, isn't it? He's a great man.
Yeah, I mean, he always speaks common sense, but I don't know the background, to be honest, Dan. And it's hard to get drawn into something when you want a member of that party at that time. And I don't know what's gone on in the background. I mean, look, people fall out in parties. Like I certainly did in my own party, didn't I? My old party, should I say, with the Conservatives. And when you've outspoken, these things happen. So it's hard to comment when I don't know what's gone on, in all honesty.
But you trust that Nigel is prepared to give up control of the party, is prepared to work with other people, is prepared to listen to senior figures like you, because that's what Ben Habib seemed to be suggesting, that he wasn't.
I mean, I wouldn't have crossed the floor if I didn't feel I could work in partnership with Nigel and Richard.
And she will run
Lincoln to mayoral seat. So, this is going to be an important election next year, as I said. And, what's the alternative? We just have the two-party status quo, Dan, where, there's not much change, or we blow the door off.
Blow the door off. No, it has to happen. It has to happen. And look, Andrea, look at the stories that only Nigel, Richard, who's been brilliant, Rupert Lowe, Lee Anderson are prepared to talk about, and people like me in the independent media. The Southport massacre cover-up. We still don't know what happened. The
Exactly.
only MPs who have raised it in Parliament in any significant way are Nigel, Richard Tice, and also
Well, look,
Robert
Dan, when
Jenner.
I was on Newsnight, I got told that I was inciting violence, for saying that questions need to be answered. And it's just crazy. I mean, look, also, when I was an MP in Parliament, I held a debate on the true cost of illegal migration. I managed to get the debate. And only 5 MPs turned up, 4 Conservatives and, the DUP. So it speaks volumes that, it's too much this Westminster elite, Westminster bubble, that they're not living in the real world. And that's why parties like Reform, or the only party is Reform actually, that they gather momentum, because something has got to change, Dan.
It does. It does. Something big has to change, because otherwise this country is going to be destroyed. I really believe you've made the right decision. Are you going to be able to campaign full time before the election?
I intend to, yes,
Okay.
definitely. I mean, look, I was a full-time candidate when I won against Ed Balls. I don't know if you saw in the speech, but I lived in all 3 areas of Greater Lincolnshire and went to school and college, university. I was the first Conservative councillor in Boston Northwest. I've been a director of 2 children's performing art academies across there. So I know the great county. I know the challenges. I've seen what they've done to fishermen in the port of Grimsby. I've seen what's happening to the farmers under Starmer. So we've got a lot of work to do, but the work starts immediately for me, Dan.
Well, Dame Andrea Jenkins, I back you all the way. Congratulations. Big decision, but I really do think it's the right one. Thank you so much.
Thank
Dame
you.
Andrea
Take
Jenkins,
care.
now a
Bye-bye.
senior member of Reform UK. And now, The Outsider. Breaking right now, Carol Vorderman has hit back at the campaigning independent journalist Charlotte Gill, who is exposing the reality about her hard left term, which The Guardian has celebrated as a later life renaissance that gives us just the kind of political hero we need. Well, I say, if this is a hero, then God help us.
With the great Professor John Curtis, I'm a fangirl of his, with Luke Trill, who has an organisation which looks into focus groups and studies different sections of society, if you like. And me, I was here talking about tactical voting, which Best for Britain will be putting together their support.
Charlotte, who has been doing incredible work on this on her Substack, had earlier posted the links I've found are between Alistair Campbell, Tony Blair, Sadiq Khan, Global, which is the radio station group that owns LBC, Carol Vorderman, James O'Brien, the news agents, led by Donkeys, Greenpeace, WWF, the UN, the US Embassy in London, Parliament, also The Rest is History, Gary Lineker and Hugh Grant. Grant isn't a Greenpeace acolyte. Press reform is his bag, which some of the Shill Army promote. Now, that prompted a clearly rocked Vorderman to respond today, writing, "Busted by the Sherlock Holmes of today. A link between Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair. Wow, who knew? A link between me and James O'Brien, who I deputise for often on his show. I might stop laughing by the weekend. This is a parody account." Right. She's rocked. She's rocked because she knows that Charlotte Gill is on her, and it is a delight to have Charlotte join me now on Outspoken. So, Charlotte, what is going on with Vorderman? Because she used to be a Tory fangirl. She would hang out with Boris Johnson and David Cameron and Matt Hancock. And all of a sudden, she's now had this transition to become the nastiest troll on the left. So what have you discovered?
Yeah, so first of all, delighted to join you, Dan, and thanks so much for having me on your show. Basically, it sounds ridiculous, but I had an epiphany one morning. I looked at something that Carol Vorderman was promoting, And it was something that I'd been digging around anyway. It's called the London Economic. I noticed it was putting out very anti-Tory, very similar content. And I'd found out that it's connected to the Politics Joe family. It's run by the same people. So that sort of played into me realizing, well, I think what I found, and you can see this is some of the materials from the London Economic showing that it crosses over with Politics Joe. Exactly the same chairman behind it, who's actually an oil and gas investor, which is pretty ironic because they whinge about renewables a lot. Well, they promote renewables and whinge about oil and gas a lot. But you can see they kind of, she's in their marketing sort of like, look, there's Carol. So this was the first little bit that I saw. And then what I worked out is that she's part of this thing called the Movement Forward. And you might have a picture of it, but
Yes, we've got that.
It's so basically we're meant to believe that Carol had this later life renaissance, as The Guardian put it, that one day she woke up and she just, she thought, I've always loved politics, like now's the time that I'm going to become a political expert. But she's actually part of this movement forward with lots of people that you might have seen on Twitter because they're actually just fairly annoying, But when you start looking, you realize that they are putting out sort of very similar content in different words. It's almost like, oh, it's Nigel Farage Day. It's the day where everyone has a go at Nigel Farage. There's James O'Brien, And I know, Dan, you've said on your show, right, that Carol, you don't get it because Carol's actually quite nice in real life, in your experience.
That's the shocking thing. This is not a woman who used to care about any of this. And actually, she used to be relatively polite. I worked with her because she would fill in for Lorraine Kelly when I was working on her show on ITV Daytime, before ITV went woke, by the way. And then when I was going through the absolute witch hunt against me that was led by a disgusting outfit called Byline Times, who do not do journalism, they do activism to try and bring down people who they hate with lies. And I won't go into it now, but that is provable. Especially you only have to look at all of the allegations against me that were completely debunked. And she was a shill for them. She was retweeting everything. So was James O'Brien. So that's why I love the work that you're doing, because it's like, why are they all engaging in the same content?
It makes perfect sense. And the reason this picture of James O'Brien and Carol Vorderman is good is because it shows that the people that kind of come out of the global school of doing things, right? It's almost like they adopt a persona, of being an arse, basically. Everyone says, I hate that James O'Brien. He's so mean. He's very aggressive. He's like always hounding people, like, ooh, And then Carol is kind of like, yeah, I'm anti-Tory, and that she kind of took on this persona that you also see with Marina Purkiss, and to another extent, Jonathan Pye, because I actually believe there's a comedy wing of what I call Shill HQ. And they're all very aggressive. And actually, the first clip of Carol Vorderman in the Best for Britain video, it's almost like, and I'm not saying that this is definitely what's happening, but it's almost like they're like, should we try Carol out, see if she works as an activist? And you get this much more tentative version of Carol Vorderman on political campaigning. And it's as if they said, can you ramp it up a bit, Carol? Like, can you be a bit more like James O'Brien, who she deputizes for? And the fact that you were hounded by Byline Times, it makes complete sense now that I've been looking into this, because it all connects into this little ecosystem. And it's almost like you get these, so you get like an agenda, basically. And it's being pumped out of these different media wings. And global is sort of, I want to be very careful what I'm saying, but global is pumping out an agenda that's discernible. And then you get the London Economic and Politics Joe. So that's one wing, one family. And then the Byline Times sort of promotes the Good Law Project and little things. It's actually a lot of Byline Times relates to Leveson too, which is a whole new. I won't add that into the mix for now because it will just get way too confusing. But it's, there are people. We all have enemies, but I mean, Dan, I know that you had it horrendously, but all they want to do is cut down people, that
who have a different view.
And actually, there are some politicians they've really come for. And sometimes I've said to them, it's actually a compliment because there are people that want Labour to stay in power, right? Because think about the things they're doing, they're getting renewable energy policies through. Some people have shares in renewables, for instance. There are people that would like Labour to stay because, they've got a stake in something. And I'm not like saying anything directly, but I'm just giving you a sort of hypothetical example of why some people like Labour.
Well, what we know for sure is that this group in the media now hunt as a pack. And the mainstream media used to try and claim that they had no agenda, that there was no political agenda. I mean, a station like LBC under Global has gone from being the voice of the working classes, it used to be on in every black cab in London, to a hard left station. I've done a lot of work on this myself. That is undeniable. Sure, they keep Nick Ferrari and Ian Dale there, but Nick Ferrari and Ian Dale are very soft now. They have gone woke themselves because they know if they challenge the left-wing agenda too much, they're out. So James O'Brien effectively took control of that station when he staged a coup to get Nigel Farage sacked after the Black Lives Matter movement. And the station is now full of these horrendous people like Marina Purkis, Carol Vorderman until she ended her contract, or had it ended, we're not sure. But there's all of the podcasts as well with total no marks like Gemma Forte, who was a shopping channel presenter and all of a sudden is now meant to be taken seriously as some sort of news commentator. So we know that's happened with Global. And the thing that's so interesting, Charlotte, and what you have been so good at pointing out is that the issues and the people always align. So tactical voting is one. And now this week, we see it with assisted dying. And it's the same people who are pushing this propaganda. Carol Vorderman, James O'Brien, More in Common, and Paul Brand, who, by the way, is meant to be an Ofcom regulated journalist for Woke ITV, but is now part of the same circle because he also has a show at, you guessed it, LBC.
Yeah, it's just the assisted dying. I'll give you one example of something that I think really proves coordination. Right. There's been a lot about water, as in Thames water are bad, privatization bad. Let's put water into public ownership. And it's kind of hilarious because you have Gemma Fort, who also, so she's hired by Global. She also works for Byline TV. And she also, like Carol Vorderman, was part of something called I don't know if I can swear on the show. Can I?
Go ahead.
It's a hot as fuck campaign by Dale Vince. Okay. And that was
who's
Dale
anything
Vince.
but hot as F.
He hired Saatchi and Saatchi and Gemma Fort and Carol Vorderman were like his, I don't know what business relationship there was, but they were his poster girls. And also Dale Vince is a funder for the Good Law Project. And Carol Vorderman fronted the Good Law Project's VIP files. And Dale Vince also talks about VIP files on BBC Newsnight. But anyway, sorry, I got a bit distracted there, but you see what I mean? It's all a bit blah, blah.
Yeah, it's connected.
But so the one thing that, so it doesn't matter what you think, right, about water. It's obviously not right, and no one likes Thames water very much. Just leave that aside, like everyone watching. But someone wants water put into public ownership. And so it's coming through in all of the global output. Like Gemma Fort and Marina Purkis have 2 shows out about water and sewage. And I'm like, these are glamorous women. I'm sorry, but I do not believe most women in general are like, oh, I'll do a show on sewage.
No, as I
And
say,
then
Gemma Forte was selling dodgy makeup on QVC up until this podcast. So, yeah, who's pulling her strings, I guess, is the question.
it's
And why?
And why? Who even wants to listen to that show? Who is tuning into these sewage shows? And another woman who has become incredibly interested in sewage and water issues is Carol Vorderman. And she was scheduled to go, and sorry, because I didn't send screenshots in advance of this, but she was meant to go on this march for clean water.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
And it was with the Good Law Project. They were going. And the Good Law Project's funders were going. Greenpeace were going, who we'll talk about in a bit, with Led by Donkeys. And Jenny Jones was going, who went to Carol Vorderman's book launch. And Chris Packham was there. But incidentally, Carol Vorderman was not there, even though, well, no one seemed to see her, even though she said it was going to
So
be
she'd
her
been
first.
used to promote it and then didn't bother to turn up herself.
It does look that way. She was like, see you here at 11 a.m. guys, sort of thing. And I said, because I was really interested in why Carol Vorderman was promoting this, and this campaign leads into Parliament, actually. So I was quite interested to see if she was there. And then it was sort of like, where's Wally? But like, where's Carol at the water protest? And one of the organisers said, I didn't see her. I have to keep an open mind. Maybe she was at the back and I just didn't see her. But it does look that way.
No, because she would have posted things. And look, I want to read actually something that you wrote, Charlotte, because it sums up the links and why we should be concerned about the links, because this one is in regards to Tony Blair. So you wrote, Tony Blair held a conference, a youth democracy conference with the charity My Life, My Say. The conference was hosted by John Sopel, who works for Global on the newsagents. John Sopel and his co-host Emily Maitlis promoted My Life, My Say's campaign for the youth vote. My Life, My Say advertised on the Outernet for the youth vote, an outdoor space owned by Global. Global hosts The Trawl with Marina Perkis and Gemma Forte. The Trawl used to be owned by Gary Lineker's podcast agency Goalhanger, where Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart have a podcast. Campbell, who helped set up his charity My Life, My Say, Coburn is now Sadiq Khan's deputy mayor for the environment. Khan has a partnership with Global for its outdoor advertising space, the Outernet, as does the National Trust, which went on the March for Clean Water with Carol Vorderman, who works for LBC. Global. The National Trust was also on More in Common's stall at the Labour Party conference. More in Common, whose director was mentioned by Carol Vorderman in a tactical voting campaign and credited one of Led by Donkeys in its reports. More in Common's events were chaired by Emily Maitlis, who works for Global, whose advertising space Outernet is used by Led by Donkeys, who Carol Vorderman did a voiceover. Vorderman has also been part of an Outernet digital exhibition. So you see, it all links up. And while we have to be careful, Charlotte, we have to be careful. My question to you is, how much is Global being paid by these big boys to run some of these campaigns, and does that money filter down? But we don't know. They're a private company. It's not declared. But what does seem very obvious is that someone is profiting from this, and there's a reason for some of these left-wing figures to shill for these very odd enterprises.
Yeah, well, I've been looking really hard, and I'm actually assembling a team now, because not just for this stuff, just in general, because I am dealing with huge amounts of data in terms of Companies House. But one thing, and it's, again, I can't tell you specific funder, but the assisted dying, that's got it's got like 650,000 on advertising on Meta, Instagram and Facebook alone. And then they had their adverts out with Global on the tube, the ones that people have been getting incredibly upset about. I mean, they are, it's disgusting. You come out of the tube and it's like, hey, want to fancy a bit of death, guys, and you've got, there's even, see that woman there, she even looks a bit like, the Sleepover in Greece, the film with Sandy, sort of as if she's dancing for joy at her sister dying. And you look, I've been telling people, when you get on the tube now, just look for global. It's absolutely everywhere. And they have a lot of commercial posters, but then think about the kind of, if you want to get a little message in, you've got that option. It's like, do you want to see The Lion King? Oh, and do you want to die as well? It's kind of ridiculous. But they also, I'm so glad that you raised this Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair Youth Democracy charity, because it's the sort of thing I put out and it kind of falls on deaf ears. People are like, oh, we've never heard of that, blah, blah. But it had funding from the US Embassy in London.
Exactly. Big money. Big money. And there's reason for people's to shills, because the moral of the story for me, Charlotte, but tell me if you disagree, is that these folk shilling for the left in the media, especially the likes of Carol Vorderman, are utter hypocrites. Because during the Boris Johnson administration, they were constantly trying to call people out for hypocrisy and their links to big money and things that they may have been paid for. But they never declare their own financial interests. They never declare who they are really working for. And so surely people should be very, very careful the next time they see one of these viral tweets from Carol Vorderman or Marina Purkis or Gemma Forte, when we don't know who is paying them.
Totally agree. I've been called a shill millions of times. I'm sure, I don't know if you have, Dan. It's just anyone on the right. It's like, oh, you're getting funding, you're this. The right, we're actually really uncoordinated, we're quite disorganized comparatively. And the difference is, you and I are aligned on lots of views, but it's not like we, the point I'm trying to...
We don't coordinate. Exactly, we don't coordinate. And also, can I just be clear? We're not paid by anyone. We can declare that. The great thing about the independent media is, because obviously Charlotte, you might not know, but Charlotte was my colleague at GB News, but we've both gone independent. And the brilliant thing about that is we don't have our strings pulled. Now, I was very honest when I was working for GB News. Sometimes I would, and I would fight back against that. Probably one of the reasons I was booted. But when you are working for one of these big conglomerates, be it Murdoch or Paul Marshall or Global, you sometimes are told what to cover and what not to cover. That's just a reality. And so for Carol Vorderman to try and claim that she's an independent journalist when there's all of these links, I think is rubbish.
Yeah, it's just, I always say, I think I'm trying to also encourage people to start thinking a bit laterally in general about our political landscape. Like, the left are fantastically coordinated. I always say they're clever, but they're not that clever. But everything they say the right is doing, just multiply it by 10 and that's what they're doing, because if you're shouting at someone, you like, look what you're doing, blah, 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 then no one's looking at what you're doing. It's the ultimate deflection. So I kind of encourage the right, and not even the right, but the sensibles, like just normal viewed people, to kind of absorb a left-wing mindset, to be like, who funds you? Just ask who funds you, and you can't go wrong too much. Just start pointing the finger at them, basically.
Exactly. Ask the same questions that they would expect from anyone else on the left. Charlotte, one of the pieces of work that you do brilliantly is woke waste. It's a whole section of your Substack, and people will be absolutely horrified when they learn what some of our money, our taxpayer money, is going to. Things like investigations into the gay porn industry. What have you discovered?
Yeah, that is one. That's the one that everyone remembers, is the Europe that gay porn built. 1945 to 2000. Don't really understand the logic, but it's had a grant of £840,000. It was given to a Portuguese professor who lives in Sweden, because he's got to find out about this gay porn across Europe. So why shouldn't the UK taxpayer pay for that?
I know. I mean,
rhetorical.
I'm just looking through the list, and it's
horrific.
It's just extraordinary stuff. And this is from a government, Charlotte, that tells us constantly that they're too broke to allow World War II pensioners the fuel allowance?
It's there, in my opinion, there's it's almost like when the left say to the right, who funds you, blah, blah, and you're having to flip it over. It's like we're living in an opposite world, like topsy-turvy world, because when you look at some of the stuff that they're obsessed with decolonizing, and I can also tell you, because I know immigration is very topical today, and Boris Johnson, I love Andrea, by the way, but Boris Johnson was, under him, Hope Not Hate, the awful left-wing charity, got funding from the taxpayer.
I think the problem is Boris thought that he was a little bit woke, and unfortunately, because he got involved with a lot of his younger friends, they convinced him that he should be backing organisations like Stonewall. But I have to read out some of these figures because it is truly astonishing what our money is going into. So the Europe that gay porn built 1945 to 2000, £841,000. Perverse collections building Europe's queer and trans archives, £136,000. Decolonising the museum, £805,000. Trans Performance Now glitching cisgenderism, £185,000. I mean, this is ludicrous. This is ludicrous. This is why we need to do what Elon Musk is promising to do in the US, and you're behind that, right?
Yeah, I've bought the domain, Dude UK, and I am working on setting up a team. It's just slow. It's slow progress because there's so much to wait. The idea that Labour are like, what should we cut? Okay, it's more like the opposite way around. It's like, we have so much to cut. It's like, what shouldn't we cut? All of it. This outfit that you're looking at, it's called the Arts and Humanities Research Council, and it gets over 100 million a year, I think it is, but it's part of a quango that gets under 9 billion a year, right?
Well, yeah, and the thing is, Charlotte, as well, we know that all of this comes from a particular perspective. So let me give you one of your examples. Everything is connected. Conspiracy theories in the age of the internet. Well, that received £786,000. I can very much imagine the things that they will claim are conspiracy theories. And a lot of them are things that people on the centre-right have promoted that have turned out to be true, especially if you look at what went on over the COVID pandemic, for example. So this idea that we can trust the government to fund projects investigating conspiracy theories is ludicrous anyway. Some of the people who were derided as conspiracy theorists during COVID, I look specifically at Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the great Dr. J. Bhattacharya, the author of the Great Barrington Declaration, are about to be in Trump's administration. So all of this funding should just be scrapped. But my concern is, I think that it will go up under Labour, actually. I think they will pump more money into this type of woke nonsense.
Yeah, me too. But this is genuinely like why shows like yours are so great, because the more traction, the more publicity this gets, the more people realize, they're being lied to. And what we really need from our MPs, and part which we do not get at all, is, apart from very few, we need small print MPs. We cannot, we want a revolution, but a lot of this is about wading through the absolute crap, all of the paperwork, and saying this. I'm trying to do a bit of it, an audit, and saying, like Javier Milei, I don't know if you've seen the Argentine president, he when he crosses off all the woke ministries, he says out, he goes afuera, and we need to afuera the crap out of Britain. But we can only do that by, going through, actually doing a very boring, monotonous task. But luckily, more people, it's gone up so much, the amount of people that know, and I cannot keep up with the amount of people messaging me that want to help, and also frustrated academics doing serious subjects.
Indeed. Well, you're doing such amazing work, and I absolutely love it. Right now, though, we've got a little bit of breaking news that I want to show you. Nigel Farage has just stormed out of an interview with Sly News. Now, he was being asked about one of Reform's MPs, a guy called James McMurdoch. I actually met him the other night. Really, really good guy. Now, in his past, this is 2 decades ago, James was convicted for some sort of physical altercation with his then partner. It's something he's spoken about. It's something that he deeply, deeply regrets. And he has served his time for it. Now, 20 years later, the mainstream media are trying to use what went on with James McMurdoch to somehow cancel the Reform Party. And what we'll see here in this interview with Sly News, Nigel had just had enough. So let's watch this.
So, are you worried about what he did?
Did he? He wasn't vetted. He wasn't vetted. James McMurdoch was one of those many candidates who wasn't vetted at all by the party. Look, I didn't know any of this when I took back over as leader.
So you said you're going to put in place the most vigorous vetting system in place now. Do you think James McMurdoch would not go through this new vetting system?
You can have your fun at Sky News. We've got 100,000 members. I've got 1 million followers on TikTok. Dame Andrea Jenkins has just joined us. She's our candidate for Greater Lincolnshire. You've had your fun. I'm off for lunch. Thank you.
Charlotte, did Nigel do the right thing there?
I think there's a general problem, which, you know, you and I are like totally in sync on. I mean, the mainstream media, it's true. They are just rubbish, and they don't grill people in the same way. So I do understand why journalists like Farage just get a bit exasperated with the whole thing. And I do think about this specific case, so there's got to be a sense of, the justice system is meant to be about rehabilitation and redemption ultimately. So it's sort of it's a question over that, isn't there?
That's the thing. It's very much like the left-wing media will only go after someone if they happen to be on the right for any form of personal proclivity. If it's someone on the left, let's just forget. Let's just forget the really anti-Semitic comments that Diane Abbott made because she's now Mother of the House and we celebrate her. But this young guy, James McMurdoch, who made a youthful indiscretion 20 years ago, let's ask Nigel Farage about it infinitum. I think this is going to see the playbook that we see with Reform UK. The point that I would make, Charlotte, though, is that it doesn't work. Look at what the mainstream media tried to do in America with Donald Trump. They overplayed their hand. And I think they're going to do the same thing here with Farage.
Yeah, I think so. I do. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about Reform and Conservatives in terms. I mean, I think I'm like you in that I want the right to unite because I think they are going to eat into each other's vote. But I don't think. I think there's going to be a really big problem soon for the mainstream media. Like the funds have been dwindling because people are cancelling their TV licenses. Sky doesn't have the same issue, I guess, because it's got the Murdoch backing. But I think one thing that worries me a bit about the BBC is they do have they've created channels so that they can cope without taxpayer funding. Well, direct taxpayer funding. They get money from the Arts and Humanities Research Council, for instance. We don't have any choice in paying for that tax. And they also get money from all sorts of other sources. I'm pretty sure Bill Gates is the funder of the BBC. So, whether we can actually get rid of them, I'm not sure.
No, indeed. Well, look, Charlotte, don't go anywhere because in just 1 minute, I'm looking forward to this one, Exposing Led by Donkeys. This is the far left outfit that, again, has been pursuing Nigel Farage ridiculously for some time. So don't go anywhere because more of that in just 1 minute. But first, I love the holidays. It's my favourite time of year in loads of ways. But I don't know about you. I'm already finding it pretty demanding, going to all the events, the dinners, shopping, looking for the gifts, planning the day itself. So at this time of year, I tend to burn out quicker than the last, which I'm sure has something to do with the fact that I'm in my 40s now, I'm getting older. This year, though, I don't plan for that to happen because while getting older is inevitable, feeling older isn't. As we get older, our body's ability to create energy declines, but recent scientific discoveries have found we can actually increase our energy levels in our cells by taking something called NMN. Now, NMN has been shown to increase energy and endurance, activate our body's ability to burn fat, enhance mental function and health, improve blood pressure, regulate blood sugar levels, and support many other health markets. Finding high-quality pure NMN is hard, so I use Verso. They conduct third-party testing for each batch produced to guarantee you get what you pay for. It contains the highest quality NMN and other research-backed ingredients that have been shown to increase energy levels and slow down the aging process. I've taken this for some time. I feel like a younger version of myself. So many improvements, actually. More energy, enhanced endurance, improved cognition, fat loss, better sleep. And if I do get a cold like I did last week, I recover so much faster. So click the link in the description on YouTube and Rumble, or head on over to buy.ver.so and use the coupon code Outspoken at checkout to save 15% on your first order. I'll repeat that address for you: www.buy.ver.so/outspoken and use the coupon code Outspoken. But now, back to the show. Breaking right now, led by donkeys, the pressure group that focuses relentlessly on figures like Nigel Farage, even though Labour is now in power, has been exposed. And they've been exposed quite beautifully as hard left activists. Charlotte Gill, the independent journalist behind Woke Waste and so much more on Substack, joins me now to reveal what she has discovered. So there they are. Four men, Charlotte. They're like craft beer, liberal, lovey lefties, right? But what do we know about their connections?
Yeah, so we know. So at first, it all starts to tie together very nicely with the whole network. So this is 2019. So Guido first spotted the clue that they are Greenpeace. They've all worked for Greenpeace before, activists. And this really is something that gets forgotten in all of their activism. And it starts linking around to everyone else. So the most interesting thing, the thing that I first spotted that I found quite interesting is I started looking into the backgrounds of each member of Led by Donkeys. And there was one called James Sadri. And he's actually left Twitter now, but I got some screenshots from his Twitter, and he's Free Palestine. You know, it goes very much with this movement that it's always pro-Palestine, the whole collective movement. But the interesting thing about him is, first of all, he's mentioned in a report by More in Common. And More in Common are the polling station. They're the kind of let's bring everyone together charity or foundation that Kim Leadbeater is pushing for. Oh, and he also loves Mariana Spring. All very interesting. It's all about anti-vax disinformation. But he has that link to More in Common. I don't know why he is mentioned on one of their reports as a sort of thank you for your advice, James Sadri. And this is I'll come back to that, but he was co-director of Team Halo in 2021, so around the time of the COVID vaccine. And they were basically trying to improve uptake of the vaccine. So they had a whole social media strategy, and they did this with YouTube. They had, I don't know if you've got the next slide, but they had combating vaccine misinformation, incidentally a bit like how Mariana Spring was doing. But the interesting thing is it starts tying round. So bearing in mind, Led by Donkeys hated Boris Johnson. They were always kicking off about him. But James Sadri, he was co-director of a project that relied on government vaccines. So you've got, on the one hand, you've got Led by Donkeys saying, oh, this man, he's so awful, Boris Johnson, who acquired the vaccines. And then you've got James Sadri tweeting out and his Team Halo, Department of Health and Social Care links to say, please take the vaccine. And ultimately, he starts linking round to proper, the conspiracy theorists will have a field day here. But the Project Halo was established in collaboration with the United Nations Verified Initiative and the Vaccine Confidence Project with support from Illuminate, IKEA, Global Challenges Foundation, and the UN. And there's all sorts of others like Bill and Melinda Gates. And then when you go back to, so he actually used to work for the UN and the BBC, James Sadro. So that's what, and then it just gets even more incestuous. So yeah, so more in common. Why do they mention him in their bringing people together report? And then why, when you remember the clip I first showed at the beginning of your show, and it shows Carol Vorderman for Best for Britain, and she mentions Luke Trill.
Yes.
And Luke Trill is the director of More in Common. And then it gets weirder. Then Carol Vorderman has promoted Led by Donkeys. She even narrates one of their films. Emily Maitlis from Global hosted one of More in Common's events. And it just goes on and on. It's just, it just constantly loops around. And Greenpeace were going on the March for Clean Water that Carol Vorderman was meant to go on. And it just, Dan, I get a brain ache from doing this stuff. Honestly,
Let's have a look at that clip of Carol Vorderman that you referred to.
With the great Professor John Curtis, I'm a fangirl of his, with Luke Trill, who has an organisation which looks into focus groups and studies different sections of society, if you like. And me, I was here talking about tactical voting, which Best for Britain will be putting together. Their support.
So it's all connected, isn't
it?
And
the last bit is that the UN brings you round to Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, and My Life, My Say, the charity promoted by the Outernet and the Youth Democracy Charity. And they both sync up with the UN to try and get youth votes. And this is why I'm investigating it. It's just a little bit too many coincidences.
Well, indeed. And the thing is, there is good reason for left-wing politicians to want to back Led by Donkeys, because it's very clear that this organisation, Charlotte, has no intention of holding the people who are in power now accountable, which is ludicrous. It's embarrassing. Instead, they have their usual targets, and their usual targets are people like Liz Truss, for fun, for sport almost, but most critically Nigel Farage, who I presume they quite rightly view as a major threat ahead of the next election.
Oh, and there's the global. You can see in the top, global.
Always global, always global.
Oh, because the advertising, yeah.
Because they're still running this Nigel Farage billboard, aren't they?
I'm not sure, but I think, it has to be taken into account as well. You remember what I said about global? They're really proud of the fact that they own 230,000 outdoor spaces in the UK. Is it a coincidence that there's a campaign group that has an advert on a TfL global board and its whole modus operandi is about outdoor activism? I mean, what company would be able to help if they needed it, But Farage, it's like I say, it's a compliment when these people get attacked, because even if it's just one person getting in their way, he's very effective. He's going to criticize this green crap. Reform are going to go for it. So if you've got a group of Greenpeace activists, who are they going to want to knock out the way first? Not literally, but they're going to go for people that are most rude about net zero, most obstructive in Parliament, even if there's just one of them. They've got to do everything they can to smear them. So
yeah, and look at this. This is their permanent billboard. I do believe it is still there, Charlotte, and it is tracking the amount of money that Nigel Farage has earned from when he was first an MP. Now, who cares? Who cares? But these guys don't like capitalism, do they? What's interesting, though, is they absolutely have no intention of looking at left-wing MPs who have conflicts of interest. I mean, where, for example, have Led by Donkeys been when it comes to Rachel Reeves? and her fake life and her lies on her CV. You would imagine that would be something that, if they were genuine journalists, they should be very, very interested in. But instead, they go for stunts like this one on Liz Truss.
Say a bit about incumbents. I think the average American is not doing well, and people do vote on. I think it was Bill Clinton's advisor who said it's the economy stupid. So I think that he will probably win.
On that.
I've got a load of Trump questions, by the way. But what?
No idea where that's come from.
Yeah, it's nasty.
I mean, that's the thing, Charlotte. It is actually bullying, I believe, when it comes to Liz Truss, actually. But she has been proved right on so many things. I mean, what we needed was a growth budget. And actually, even just before they pulled that stunt, there she is saying Trump's going to win. But these sorts of stunts are so designed for this very specific audience that you are so onto. It is the Vorderman crowd, the Forte crowd, the Emily Maitlis crowd, and they look up to Led by Donkeys as if they're sort of intellectual giants, and so hilarious for stunts like that, which I actually think are just juvenile and verging on bullying.
Yeah, well, and the other interesting thing to note about the videos that Trump mentioned, because there is this sort of global alliance, like Global, literally the company, they did not want, tied into what the outernet, the global outernet was used for, they did not want Trump to win, which seems pretty obvious, but and this is getting into even more sort of deep state territory, but basically the Democrats and Labour were banking on a global Green New Deal, and Greenpeace explicitly say they want that. So there's this sort of coordinated campaign to shut down, to come for Trump. Also Musk, the whole B Sky movement was basically about trying to shut down Musk because he represents Trump. So you start, even with that one video, when it just talks about Trump, you start getting into even more ideological territory of like where these alliances are and what they're trying to, why they were at the UN, some of these people. Yeah, I don't know how confusing that is to to process.
It's so funny, by the way, that you mentioned the Blue Sky thing, Charlotte, because that is another coordinated campaign. I think it's going to fail, right? Because Blue Sky is clearly such a miserable pro-censorship platform where the left just talk to each other, which they think is fun, but actually I don't think they're really going to want it. But what I think is brilliant is Guido here calling out John Sopel from Newsagents, one of these guys who's connected to all of the things that you investigate. And a few days ago, he said, I'm gone. And since then, Charlotte, he seems to be tweeting about 10 times a day. It's like, just leave. Just leave. If you want to go to Blue Sky and talk to all of your mates because you're so opposed to free speech and the concept of democracy and actually having a debate where people can challenge you in a forthright manner, just go.
I'm not surprised at all. I started noticing in September, I got this feeling that people were nudging others onto B Sky. I had no idea what it was, but I could even see accounts that were at the Labour Party conference, like the Labour Environment Network, something along those lines, and they had B Sky. And I tweeted at the time, I sort of said, guys, like, I don't know what's going on, but there's some sort of nudging campaign. And I called it, do you know what I called it? B Sky conspiracy theory. And at the time it sounded, I thought it was kind of so crazy that I just had to like joke and be like, haha, conspiracy theory. But then I don't know if you saw, there was a report by the Center for Countering Digital Hate. And the US found this, and it's basically this organization set up by Morgan McSweeney, who's now Keir Starmer's chief of staff. And the US stumbled upon these documents saying they literally want to kill Musk's Twitter as part of their strategy. And so it was a concerted campaign.
Of course.
And the thing is, I don't understand is that a lot of people, I kept trying to put it out there, like these activists, there's even, I don't know if you got the picture of them, where it's sort of Carol Vorderman, and there's a few of them that you actually can click on a link and you get like the shill army already, you automatically uploaded. Got them
Oh,
all
yes.
uploaded.
No, I did see that, actually, that they're all listed. Now, Charlotte, just to end, I want to show you, finally, Rachel Reeves has been asked about her CV. But to me, I don't know if you agree, Charlotte, but this is extraordinary, because this has been a story now, right, for well over 2 weeks. It's so egregious in terms of what she did. And it feels like the mainstream media are very often working in cahoots to not report on stories, because you just know that if this had been a Conservative Chancellor who had effectively faked their previous life, that would have been leading the newsagents, it would be leading James O'Brien's show every night, Marina Purkis, Carol Vorderman, they would be leading campaigns. So there are completely two rules in this world. But finally, and I'm going to give them credit, it was woke ITV, believe it or not. It took them 2 weeks. Finally, they did ask Rachel Reeves the question, and she responded terribly. Watch this.
Worked as an economist at the Bank of England before I became a Member of Parliament, and also in financial services at Halifax Bank of Scotland. I've got the experience to do this job as Chancellor of the Exchequer, as well as the 14 years as I had as a Member of Parliament, chairing the Business Select Committee and as Shadow Chancellor. People should judge me on the job that I do, fixing the economy, fixing the mess that we inherited from the Conservative government.
But what do you say about the fact there was a change made to the profile, and it now says retail banking, it once said economist? Just explain that.
Well, I'm an economist. I studied economics. I got a master's in economics from the London School of Economics, and I worked as an economist at the Bank of England. I then used that experience in the private sector, working for Halifax Bank of Scotland, where I worked in financial services before I became an MP 14 and a bit years ago.
But it was changed, wasn't it, the profile?
Well, I worked as an economist. That is my profession. I am an economist. And then I worked in retail banking at Halifax Bank of Scotland in Halifax before I became a Member of Parliament. I'm proud of the work that I did before I became an MP, both at the Bank of England and in the private sector in retail banking.
Oh, Charlotte, she's like a robot, isn't she? But again, no big coverage of that. You probably wouldn't know it had happened.
It's like, she sounds like Vicky Pollard. It's like, yeah, but no, but it's just... It's really, it's like, they are like a wall that it's very difficult to talk to them, because it's like a stream of bullets of boringness coming at you. But they're so partisan. We need our own Paul Brand, he's bloody good at what he does, getting rid of people he doesn't like, Boris Johnson. We need our own one. But
we do, but the thing is, I think you're it, actually. But I constantly point out to Paul Brand, who, by the way, was also moaning about how horrible X is now because he's obviously gone over to Blue Sky. By the way, if a mainstream journalist goes to Blue Sky, you know they're not impartial. You immediately know they're on the left. So Paul Brand, I mean, we've known that anyway. But I'm constantly posting to him. He doesn't reply, not surprisingly. But I'm saying, Paul, are you on this Rachel Reeves story? Because you cared so much about every little detail to do with Boris Johnson. Every little detail, Paul. Whether he had a drink at a particular time. But when it comes to Rachel Reeves, do you think he spent 1 second? No, of course not, because he's shilling for the assisted dying campaign. But Charlotte Gill, I absolutely love your work. It's so important that we do start exposing all of these networks that work together on the left, and people can find your brilliant Substack via mine at www.outspoken.live, because I have recommended under my recommendations tabs Charlotte's Substack, and I really recommend it here as well. And I think the key point is, Charlotte, people need to support you, don't they, so that you can keep doing this work independently.
Yes, please. Because I am doing, no one funds me. I'm not tough to the street. So, I'm like you, Dan, people power.
Yeah, that's the key thing. Be funded by the audience, which we are, because then we have no conflicts of interest. And it's very, very important in this world, and we've seen it in America, that's what we get to in terms of journalism here. So I love what you're doing, Charlotte. Keep fighting the good fight and come back soon to Outspoken.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a
Great
good
to speak
one.
to you. Thank you, Charlotte. But coming up in the Uncancelled After Show today, on the aforementioned Substack, you've got to get there because it's all going on. A bombshell new report claims that Prince Harry wants to make a royal comeback, with King Charles open to the idea of his son returning with Meghan Markle. What? No, thank you. Royal YouTube sensation, according to Taz, she isn't happy about that either. So we'll reveal what's really going on in just a moment. You know it's important to me that we do have a safe space on Substack where there's no censorship, no control, all about free speech. So I really do recommend www.outspoken.live. It is our membership section. It means if you are a paid member, you get half an hour of extra content every day. And this week, the exciting news is it's the Black Friday sale because it's, of course, Thanksgiving today in America, Black Friday tomorrow, and it's our biggest ever sale, 30% off. So for just £3.50 plus VAT here in the UK a month, you can support Outspoken and get access to the after show every day via www.outspoken.live. But please do subscribe there regardless. I know how tough times are, so it's absolutely fine if you want to subscribe as a free member. That means we can keep in touch. You're supporting me. You're becoming part of the Outspoken family, so I would really, really value that too. Back tomorrow. Big one tomorrow, 5 p.m. UK time, midday Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Cameron Bell will be joining me. She has just been released from prison. You remember, she is the woman who got locked up for 9 months simply for citizen journalism after the Southport riots. So I'm very much looking forward to speaking to her. I promise to keep fighting for you, and I'll see you on the after show with According to Taz on Substack in just a couple of minutes.